Hey gang, Matt Ayub here for Facts and Firearms. Our topic for this week is the evolution of different shooting platforms and the modifications thereof. You'll find modifications and evolutions in virtually any gun platform there is. Pistol, rifle, shotgun, within handguns. You've got revolver, traditional double action, striker fired, double action only, single shot, etc., etc. So for example, here to narrow it down a bit, we've taken the 1911 platform. 1911, the John Moses Browning's finest design, in my opinion, comes out. After World War I, in the early 1920s, the military did a survey of the soldiers, said, okay, we've had the war to end all wars, but just in case we're wrong about that, what can we be improving on our small arms? Some of the things they found were the sights were too small. They found there was a tendency for the gun to shoot low, which was probably people just jerking the triggers. And we found, you got to remember back then, the average American male stood about 5'6" with proportional size hands. And they found the trigger long to reach. They found also pinching of the web of the hand between the hammer spur and the grip safety. So in the latter 1920s, the 1911A1 came out. This Springfield mil-spec comes pretty close to that. Improved sights, not as good as on the mil-spec, but better than the original, which was sort of a knife blade front and a very tiny U-notch rear. The sides of the trigger guard were niched out here on the frame on both sides, and that has become a tradition with all 1911s pretty much since. And the trigger was shortened. Notice the easy reach here. And a brief digression, if you have a short-fingered person, male or female, and they want a gun with some decent power to it that's also pretty shootable, get a 1911A1 configuration short trigger 1911. For us average-sized fans, it gets right into that distal joint that some of us like for more leverage on the trigger. And for short fingers, gets them right, their pad right centered on the trigger. The grip tang was extended, not enough in the opinion of many of us, but somewhat. And the arched housing was installed. What that did was it levered the gun muzzle upward in the grasp in hopes of reducing those low hits that they had talked about. As I said, I think it was probably, in retrospect, probably trigger jerking that caused it. And today, the original flat housing, as you see here in a more modern 1911, is pretty much the standard today. The next major evolution, apart from caliber, the .38 Super caliber coming in 1930, was the commander length. This is a Colt Commander that's had a 5-inch barrel added. So picture this knot here, and that's the Colt Commander of 1950, originally with a lightweight aluminum frame, later made with a solid steel frame, which this one is a Combat Commander. By the mid-20th century, gunsmiths were shortening and reducing the butts, sort of chopping and channeling the 1911 pistol. It began with the military armorers doing it for general officers' pistols. That caught on in the private sector, and as near as I can track it, two men were really driving it on opposite coasts, not working together with each other, but just making the same discoveries and doing the same work independently. On the West Coast, the most famous of them, Armand Swenson, and on the East Coast, George Sheldon. And talk about coincidence, they both nicknamed their gun the Bobcat. They basically shortened the front end, shortened the butt, reduced capacity by 1 round, but made for a more compact carry pistol. Colt figured, hey, if this is going to be a cottage industry among gunsmiths, that's nature's way of telling us we can probably sell a bunch if we make them that way. So they brought out the officer's model, which originally was a rather flawed pistol in my experience in terms of feeding, etc. And ultimately they brought in Bill Lockridge from Cylinder and Slide, one of the great master gunsmiths. And with his input, they created what I think is the best small 1911 Colt ever made, the Colt Defender. So one evolution that you'll find with the different guns is size. Historically, because Colt started off with the 1911s, we refer to this size gun as the government model, this size as the commander, and this size as the officer's size, because Colt, who originated that platform, so named theirs. You would also have hybrids. This is the Colt CCO. Several people now are making their own versions, and everybody colloquially calls them CCO. Stands for Colt Combat Commander Carry, Concealed Carry Officers, whatever you might want to put it. It's basically the commander length slide with the 4 1/4 inch barrel on the lightweight officer's model frame. It's also available in steel frame, such as the Nighthawk variation, the T3. It's one of my personal favorites. It fits the hand extremely well. It's light to carry. And the 4 1/4 inch barrel turns out to be pretty much as reliable as the 5 inch barrel, and didn't have anywhere near as many feed problems as the much shorter 3 1/2 inch officers or the 3 inch Defender, because that shorter barrel just created so many issues in terms of cyclic reliability in the mechanism. Accessorizing, they began with the rugged fixed sights, which got bigger so you could see them better, but still high visibility. Wayne Novak brought out his Novak type sight, seen here on the Ruger copy of the lightweight Commander. They started putting adjustable sights on them about the same time they started accurizing them for pistol competition. The 1911 45 being the American military pistol, the National Rifle Association made competition with the National Military Pistol a standard part of the program. So everybody shooting for the national championship would shoot 90 rounds with a .22, usually a semi-automatic, beginning with the Colt Woodsman target versions back in the early 20th century. A medium caliber called the centerfire category, anything from 32 to 45. And a great many shooters in the old days, back when I got in a bullseye, were still using the 38 caliber revolver in centerfire. The guns were very accurate, they had very mild recoil, but one had to put up with thumb cocking the hammer for a single action fire. Only a few people shot them double action. You needed adjustable sights for the distances involved, 25 to 50 yards. And also if you were going to change loads, 185 grain mid-range at low velocity versus a 230 grain ball at 820 to 880 feet per second, a plus P 185 grain at 1140 feet per second, or a plus P 230 grain at 950 might all have slightly different point of aim, point of impact coordinates. And for that, adjustable sights really made sense. This is the Springfield Range Officer, and it typifies the all-around gun, a gun that you can use okay for a match. I've won matches with this, and works for carry. This was my last carry gun in law enforcement, with privately owned, department approved. Utterly out of the box, no modifications except for a beveled magazine well for faster reloads. Now, in the competition arena, when we started seeing the run and gun games, the so-called action pistol shooting, we started seeing compensators. Back in the 1970s, early 1980s, John Shaw, one of the great pistol champions back then, went to Jim Clark, the great gunsmith at Clark Custom. Jim had pioneered the long slide 1911, in which he took two slides, cut one off, welded another inch to the front of it, and did it so seamlessly it looked as if they'd been forged as one. And those gave a longer sight radius, a little bit smoother cycle and slow fire shooting, and were somewhat popular in competition shooting. John went to Jim Clark had him put a barrel weight on the front, and that became the first of the so-called pin guns, because 45s had become immediately popular in the sport of bowling pin shooting that began in the mid-1970s in the United States. That quickly was supplanted by the recoil compensator with expansion chamber. This is a classic example from the 1970s, or excuse me, this one was built in the 1980s for me, by Michael Plaxco, a world champion shooter who was also a world-class gunsmith. The expansion chamber, as the burning gases emerge from the muzzle, not only are jetted upward to help force the muzzle down and reduce muzzle rise, but also, as the bullet goes through the hole in the front, those expanding gases hit the metal platform here and sort of try to pull the gun forward against the recoil impulse. So as a result, both muzzle rise and rearward recoil were reduced. This gun I got from Mike in the 1980s. I won the Montreal charity match with it, and a bunch of steel matches and pin matches. This is an updated version of the compensator from DR Middlebrooks. I believe this is a 9-port expansion chamber. And this one reduces the kick even more significantly. Along the way, of course, adjustable sights. And on the target guns, it was popular to reduce the trigger pressure to as little as 2.5 pounds. My Clark Custom Long Slide 38 has literally a 2.5 pound trigger. You can't drop the slide and let it slam forward or the hammer will follow. That's how critical the sear engagement is. You would not want to trigger pull that light on a self-defense gun. Generally with a 1911, 4 pounds is the red line minimum for approval by, for example, NRA at the Distinguished Match of the President's 100. And the Colt Armor at school says minimum 4 pounds for a duty weapon, a police officer's gun or a self-defense gun that's liable to be used under stress. Finally, in any platform, you can find it enlarged. The Mauser rifle wound up being expanded to take elephant gun cartridges. The shotguns were made bigger for 10 gauge and 12 gauge Magnum. And here in the 1911, we have the LAR Grizzly. It shoots a 45 Magnum round, 45 Winchester Magnum. You can see from the magazine how long the cartridge is. And the ballistics come very close to 44 Magnum. We had a match in New Hampshire where I used to live that we called the lumber shoot. Instead of shooting bowling pins off the table, there were big chunks of wood, literally logs, that you had to shoot off the table. This thing took them off awfully quick. It ejected the spent brass so far, you needed an expedition to recover it. And the expansion chamber compensator here on the front was pretty much a mandatory accessory if you wanted to be able to control the gun. So that's just kind of a tip of the iceberg of how handgun design evolves in terms of size, in terms of function, in terms of accessorizing for specialty purposes. Yeah, it's a classic example of the principle, tailor the tool to the task. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful. I hope you'll subscribe. My settled wife put this there to remind me to tell you that. And throw us a like if you wish, and ring the bell so we can notify you of upcoming content. Thanks for taking the time with us.